Good afternoon, everyone. What a great crowd. So please have a seat. So we appreciate you guys coming after lunch. We've been super excited about Zoom Phone the last year as it's come to market. I'm Colby Nish, for all of you that I haven't met yet out there, and I run our enterprise sales team for Zoom Phone. And I don't have an orchestra to conduct, I don't have an astronaut or a celebrity here, but I have something better for you. And that's 2 customers that have deployed Zoom Phone, and we really want to spend the time to help you understand the journey they've gone, some from starting at beta to where they're at today. So if we could we take a moment and each of you introduce yourself and your company as well?
Okay. Hey, everybody. My name is Henry Koo with Ciena. A little bit about Ciena is we're the best at moving bits around the world. We have 1,800 customers globally, and 85% of the service providers trust in us with their business, and including some of the new content players. But in IT, our most important customers are the 6,000 employees around 35 countries.
And I'm Kevin Crodle. I work at Take-Two Interactive, and they are a very big video game company. If you're familiar with Red Dead Redemption 2, Grand Theft Auto, NBA 2K, one of Eric's favorite games, or his kids' favorite games anyway. And we have about 6,000 employees worldwide, and we're on sort of the early stages of our Zoom rollout for Zoom Phone.
Yeah, and I think you're repping one of the games today,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. This is a BioShock shirt.
Looking good.
Being in the video game industry, I don't have to wear a suit, which is great.
So I help take care of IT, network, unified communication, and end-user computing services. Previous to Ciena, I was at LinkedIn, and before that, I spent a lot of time at Cisco.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my responsibility is everything around real-time communications. So, before our company was on Skype for Business, which is for the full stack, including voice, and we're currently migrating that over. I am also responsible for AV and making sure our artists can communicate with each other properly, both for creative reviews, and so we're very demanding from a quality perspective. So.
Excellent. That's a great transition for us to understand, where were you at a year ago? What type of environment did you have in place that you were supporting, or maybe it was multiple environments?
I'll go first. I want to take us a little bit further back, before Zoom phones, and we replaced WebEx and Intercall to the Zoom conferencing. And there was a big transition. Ciena IT was coming off about a multi-year procurement project that took a lot of resources and just sucked a lot of the people's minds out of that project. And it was refreshing because after that project, a new CIO came in and kind of changed things up a little bit. And the way I would describe it is just think about the previous CIO, very good guy, more of a defensive-minded. Blocking and tackling, run the ball, 3 and out, punt it. And then when the new CIO came in, he was focused on user experience, company engagement. He basically ran the West Coast offense. Everybody down the field, 4th and 10, we're going for it. So he freed us up a lot to take some chances, and we knew that he had our backs. So that's when we began to say, okay, how do we kind of up-level the Ciena employee engagement? We talked to our CEO, and he says, hey, I want video, and I want to see people. I want people to see one another. And at that time, we have other products, but when we put it out there, Zoom conferencing, our users picked it. So we began just transitioning to Zoom. We were averaging about 5 million minutes a month on the legacy platform, and when we went to Zoom, we doubled it to now 10 million minutes a month. And we went from practically 0 voice over IP, just a lot of dial callbacks, ran up the bill, to now we're 80% VoIP. So all the money we kind of saved, we reinvested in now Zoom rooms. So recently, in about a year and a half, we deploy about over 100 Zoom rooms globally.
Impressive.
Yeah, coming from Skype for Business, we rolled out Skype for Business with enterprise voice very early in its life cycle. And as you know, what Microsoft has done with Microsoft Teams, that transition has not been the most, they've sort of taken a different direction than what Skype for Business used to be. And what our needs of Take-Two is around quality, right? And with With Zoom, you can have that video first, so we can do creative review. And with Zoom Phone, it gives us the ability to have everything on one platform, which we really like.
Excellent. Henry?
Yeah, so with the success of Zoom conferencing, that allowed us to say, okay, now what's next? That one kind of thing that sparked us to transition was we just decided and say we're not going to renew on the legacy PBX infrastructure. We're going to turn that money and look for a cloud provider. And at that time, we looked at others out in the marketplace, and Zoom Phone wasn't quite ready yet. And I think in a lucky way, we waited long enough, because when we put out the proof of concept products to our users, they're like, why am I having multiple apps to try to join a conference and then make a phone call? It's confusing to me. I want to be able to stay on one app and just make and receive calls, or graduate it to a conference and do all the cool stuff that people should be able to do today.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, we wanted to dig into kind of the story of how you got started. So you both were existing Zoom Meetings customers, deploying Zoom Rooms, and we hear a lot of this from customers, like, what's that next evolution? We were talking about Zoomtopia last year. At the time, I was at Cisco, and I see this crazy little video of Neil showing off Zoom Voice at the time, and thinking, like, well, how's that going to fit into the stack? And then Kevin, you took that and ran with it, right? You got into the beta program, and you've spent a lot of time with our product team making it better as we've continued to evolve. Can you share like how you got into that and how you started your proof of concept?
When looking for a different option when it comes to moving away from our previous provider, since our workforce is an information worker workforce, meaning that we have artists, there's not really many, it's not like a hospital where everyone's doing extension callings all the time. All we really need out of our phone system is almost legacy. Just like on your iPhone today, is like when you call your kids, you don't actually make a phone call to them. You actually make a Zoom call, or another a visual-based call. So when we were looking at what we need out of a communication system, that legacy calling function, or just making a standard phone call, yes, it's a necessary evil, but you still need to have it for everyone, so they can actually make support calls, or they can call their insurance company, or call another studio for that matter.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I know your guys' environment's kind of similar to how we use Zoom internally. You get to this point where you're just so used to making that point-to-point Zoom meeting call where I just click and we're right into a video. It's that remaining part of PSTN that I need to communicate out or take that call in. And that's really where we focus rounding the stack. So it's interesting just how we both use it the same way. Henry, how about yourself? How did you get started down this journey with Zoom Phone?
It was just making a decision not to renew on the PBX infrastructure, and because we weren't getting a lot of good feedback, and if somebody had some poor user experience, we couldn't really look into it. So we said, okay, everybody's really liking this cloud communication, and in a way, just like you mentioned, to be able to graduate that experience, that engagement, and so that's where we decided to say, look, let's wait for this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great, and you're kind of starting down that path of like, you talked a little bit about the on-prem implementation you had and being able to get to those analytics that you have out there. How has that changed? It sounds like you had some pain with that deployment prior. Has it changed quite a bit on how you're doing MACDs and handling support and using the Zoom dashboard?
Yeah, I'll go first on that. Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, when our users would let us know that the phone call over PSTN wasn't that well, or some noise background, or couldn't hear, the best we could do is acknowledge it, maybe open a ticket, and then go test it out after the fact, and then send it to our providers to go look deeper. There was no data, no analytics. There's no way for us to tell what was the problem. Now with the Zoom Phone dashboard, you could see a lot of level of details. You could then take down information, what type of calls, where is having a problem. So it's very powerful.
Interesting. How about you, Kevin?
From a manageability perspective, what I love about Zoom Phone is something very basic. It's just issuing phone numbers to users, actually. Because one of the things I didn't like about the previous system is that you couldn't just choose a phone number from a list or from a pool of numbers that I've allocated. So I couldn't delegate that very easily down to support. From an analytics perspective, you get that MOS score. So anytime you have a user make a phone call, and I think what Vi told me last week is that the average MOS score for Zoom, for Zoom calling is through the charts. So it's very rare that a call goes bad, and when it does, it's usually due to internet-based issues. And what I love about it is that this type of visibility is pretty much in real time. So you have that full analytics. Even in meetings, you have that in real time. And in a call, you can see most of those analytics within seconds of after. And in previous solutions, you'd have to use something like an audio codes OVOC or something like that to actually see your analytics of your carrier calls.
Yeah, I know for me, it's really nice to see the dashboard and be able to drill in just to either the calls that had a problem, or when someone just calls you and says like, hey, Henry, I had a bad call, what was the issue? You can quickly dial right into them, right? Now I wanted to transition a little bit because Zoom Phone has different licensing options and different deployment options. For those that don't know, we do have a free license that allows this extension dialing. But a lot of people get, I wouldn't say confused, but they look at the two different deployment options of either Zoom deploying or providing the PSTN services. And so we see a lot of customers that really like that simplicity. And if you missed in the keynote, we're opening up Western Europe and a number of other countries, and we continue to expand there. But some people really love that predictability on what that spend is. Those other places or the contracts you have in place with other service providers, they really like our bring your own carrier, BYOC deployments. I believe you've both taken a different route. Can you talk about what you deployed and why and what you're seeing with that?
Yeah, we started with our North America because it was first became available, and our R&D headquarters up in Canada and our corporate headquarters in Hanover, Maryland. And there was a lot of calls going back and forth. And as you know, on the PBX world, we were paying basically long distance and local charges. And when Zoom Phone came out, we realized that we could just port all the numbers over and bypass the carrier calls. And it became pretty much just a VoIP call and free within the North America region. So that was the motivator for us to say, all right, let's go.
Yeah. So all your users are unlimited, correct?
Yeah, for those type of calls. And we started up with R&D 2,000 licenses for the DIDs. And then later on, we expanded now to, upped it up to 4,000, and we're going to up it some more for the rest of the world when you guys are ready.
Excellent. How about you, Kevin?
Well, I do give you very good props for porting numbers while cutting over users. That is something that we are definitely not comfortable with. So that is what I always recommend is always disassociate between porting numbers and cutting over users for a large enterprise. And if you already have a large infrastructure today or centralized sub-trunking or internet-based, or even a large PBX that's on the network, you can always use the BYOC, or in layman's terms, bring your own SIP trunk. So you can do that in two different ways. You can do that as part of, you just point a SIP trunk directly to Zoom over the internet, or you can do it over a private connection. So you can maintain your quality store, so you're basically acting as a carrier for Zoom. And in addition to that, that SIP trunking is that you can use that for a couple different things. It's not just about dial tone, is that all calls will come back to you as well. So if you're sending calls to your own internal ACD system, or if you're, or if for other countries that you haven't cut over yet, you can definitely still maintain your dial plan inside of Zoom. Yes, Zoom is still an endpoint, so meaning that it doesn't have the features aren't entirely there in terms of routing and digit map mapping just yet, but I think they're working on it though.
Yeah, and what's nice, you can mix and match yours, right? So for those North America areas, those that want to provide PSTN through Zoom, but all those other remote locations, we do BYOC, and then it gives you that one dashboard to manage all of these.
Yeah, initially we were a little concerned as well. Even though we run the West Coast offense, you don't want to take that much risk. But as we sat down with the Zoom team, and they really guided us on the porting and the scheduling and provide enough flexibility for us to educate our users. And we knew that it was going to be a big bang. Either it ported or it didn't. If it didn't, you stay on the legacy and you still had a dial tone. So that made us feel more comfortable with the Zoom team's guidance.
We're still talking about manageability of the system. How was it for you and your team supporting it, making that transition from Avaya or Skype for Business into Zoom from a phone perspective? Was that Was that difficult? Was it super simple? Can you share any insights for those out there?
The good news is that last few weeks that delegation in RBAC has improved substantially within Zoom. So you can now map security admins to security groups, via Okta or SAML mapping. So that was actually shipped about 2 weeks ago, which I'm very excited about. So we can actually delegate groups of users to admins. And before you could do it just by adding admins manually, but the only problem with that is you can't do that at scale because you can't constantly just put in email addresses over and over again versus integrating it into your IDP or your SAML authentication systems that we love to use.
Yeah, for us, the transition, as we mentioned earlier, was a lot easier having Zoom conferencing go first. So the same team that supported, the previous migration knew that it's easier to learn, and there's enough training and material out there to now admit it in a different way, be an administrator in a different way. So the PBX world, although there was some administration, but it was a lot more kind of outsourced to the providers, and we were very much in the dark. You had a lot of low-level hands-on work, and now we feel like our talent's been up-level with now the training of a cloud application.
That's excellent. Excellent. So I wanted to shift gears from the management side to your end users. Sometimes it's difficult. I know some of you have gone through and said, like, hey, we're going to move to more soft phone based as we look at the usage of those handsets out there. And then just the Zoom client, it sounds like your users were pretty familiar with using Zoom for launching those meetings and using their rooms. Can you talk about, what's the adoption been and the training for your end users and any lessons learned along that path?
Yeah.
I think the biggest lesson learned is you have to if you can, Skype for Business allows this, and I'm sure other call systems allows as well, look at your analytics of your physical phones. And it took me a long time, it took my account manager for Zoom really, beating it into me, saying you really don't need physical phones on people's desks. And until we actually looked at the numbers, and of the footprint of phones that we had in our environment of physical phones, you'd be surprised how many people are receptive of just receiving a headset. And not a old $10 Amazon special, but if you give them a nice quality noise canceling Sennheiser headset, how far that goes, and they can travel with that headset too, which they enjoy that a lot better. Because when we actually looked at it, as our actual physical install base is like our phones aren't used that often. It's only about like 10 or 20% of phones get used on a monthly basis.
Interesting.
For us, we're a little bit older company, been around for 28 years, so it's more of a culture thing. Some users, majority of them in R&D, they were just used to having a desk phone and a handset. So your point is exactly right. We wanted to give them a very good headset to help them transition. I think that's the most important thing, is educating the users, be there for them. We ran these series of what we call Excite Days. We would post up in the cafeteria and start promoting it, offer some goodies, Q&A. We even did raffles to get people excited for the better headsets. So we did that at all the locations multiple times. And we also make sure that things are going to work. So we focus on not just the users, but the infrastructure, have everything ready. Because the first time they have a problem, they're going to go, oh, I told you this thing's not going to work. So we made sure that we got those things buttoned up. And the third piece is, we had to give them a face to give feedback to. So, I took down names of the people that had most concerns and followed back up with them. And with the analytics, it was very easy to go back and validate how much of these top noise makers are using the phones. And it turns out that they were really making like 1 phone calls every 2 days. But with the same analytics, we went back and looked at the top 10, 20 users. They love it.
That's great. I mean, it's impressive.
Or the favorite feature, though, that I think our users really like is the ability to choose your caller ID in the Zoom clients. It's so small and so insignificant in some ways, but to be able to just say, oh, I want to use my actual number, or I can change it to my caller ID, my Pacific caller ID or my office caller ID, so I can anonymize my call, and they can go back and forth whenever they want, and that's something they do enjoy.
Yeah, and for us is the mobile capability. The legacy system didn't have a mobile client, so it was a big leap.
Interesting. Yeah, you got me thinking about the new CIO talking about moving from defense to offense, and I was with a customer just the other day talking about, you'll never get fired if you buy this manufacturer. I think we've probably all said that or heard that once or twice. How's that really changed as far as your organization? The CIO was that catalyst. Has it made you a champion? Has it made them a champion? What do you say to those that are kind of stuck in the days of old?
I really think the new approach, the new culture in IT has led the transformation for the company, because now we're offering and focusing products and services starting with the end user, starting with our customers. Before, we were trying to maybe focus too much on a process, investing in something that was going to make the company money, and upgrade this, do that. So that has kind of flipped on its head totally, and it aligns with where the industry's going, because our CEO, when the new CIO came in and we asked him one question and say, what are you looking for IT to do? All he said was, I want to raise the employee engagement level across the company. Yeah. And that's when we decided and say, look, we need to become a video first culture. And now the benefits are starting to show.
That's outstanding. How about you, Kevin?
Well, when choosing a solution, the biggest thing that we look at is what is most effective to our users, and it's all about time, because we have to value our artists' time, because if they're fiddling with a phone, or if they're fiddling with trying to communicate with each other, that's less time they're actually, being able to do the things that, that create value for the company. And what Zoom has allowed us to do is, yes, phone is still a part of our communication, but the majority of our calls are VoIP-based calls. And yes, you still need that, and I keep on ribbing Vi, is like, when is fax coming to the system? Because I can finally get rid away of my fax machines for that random IRS paperwork that we have to file once every 10 years, but he still said TBD from that one.
Well, and it's the Zoom culture from product development and listening to our customers has been a breath of fresh air for myself. But you guys have been very engaged with the team of providing feedback, and I know a lot of customers out here as well. Is there something that you're most excited about as you've formed a lot of the roadmap, and what we've delivered over the last few months? And every month, as you probably see, we have a pretty major release. Is there something that's released in this last major one just 2 weeks ago, or is there something upcoming that you're really looking forward to?
So I'll take this one first. One of my favorite new features that is actually not available in Skype today, or even in Microsoft Teams, is multi-line appearance. So if you're used to those old, some people love that old school way, especially in the boss admin scenario, where you can just park a call on a line key and pick it up again. And even we showed it yesterday, who showed it yesterday? It was Vi that showed it yesterday morning during the opening keynote, where you can just park your call on yourself and you can pick it back up on your phone. And that same technology works in a boss admin scenario too. So you can pick up your boss, put that call back on their line key, and then they can pick it back up again, which is really nice.
That's exactly the one. We held off our CEO, the C-level office, on the migration, on the porting, just because we need to wait for that.
Interesting.
And that shipped 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
In terms of the evolution of how features have shipped in Zoom, it is not your grandparents' phone system. They have iterated every 3 months, where at the beginning of the year it was just porting numbers, and this is why Sienna went before I did. And then SIP trunking came very early in the summer, and now we're really getting the feature set so we can really do the worldwide deployment.
Yeah.
And mobile contacts. Mobile contacts was a biggie.
Yeah. We're getting there. I mean, and keep them coming. And for the rest of you, we love that feedback, and it helps form our roadmap. As we have a little bit of time, and then we'll also open it up to questions for those out there. We'll have a few more minutes. But is there any advice you'd give to those out here that may have been here last year, may have seen this from one of the Zoom salespeople, and they're thinking like, hey, I have meetings, what's that next step? Any advice you'd give to them?
The big advice is, when you're doing a voice transition, it takes a lot of work. It does. If you're going to go the porting route that Henry did, is that just be aware that if you're doing a large group of numbers, it's going to take usually 60 or 30 to 60 days to actually port those numbers off your losing carrier. And just be aware of your paperwork. So meaning that usually the way you want to do is just you want to pull your bill from your carrier. You'd ask for all the list of the numbers, or just do an audit of your circuits. They'll do that very happily. Just don't tell them you're porting away just yet. And then you got to submit that paperwork, and they can schedule the ports. Or the other way you can do it is definitely, you can do the SIP trunking route if you're set up for that. And I always recommend using a session border controller for that, or a voice gateway, like an audio codes or a ribbon or an Oracle SBC. And then you can just SIP trunk directly to Zoom, and it just acts as another PBX on the network. And you can do that over the internet, which is the quicker way to do POCs, and you can do it over private line. And so the Zoom is in most Equinix data centers, so you can do Equinix Expressway for private trunking, or you can do a cross-connect, and do BGP peering as well too.
I second that. The porting could get tricky. You got to be flexible, and the data's got to be clean. Otherwise, the provider will kick it back and make you reschedule and get in the back of the line again, because they're not in a hurry to lose any business. The second thing I think is looking back, we all might think that it costs money to do technology transformation, but in our case, it would have cost more money had we stayed on the legacy platform. So we're actually able to save some money, and we're going to reinvest with some cooler collaboration stuff with you guys.
Yeah, we got some new devices for you guys to add in there, right?
Yep.
Some amazing video devices, and hopefully you'll see a lot of that innovation coming to handsets as well.
Yep.
So we have some extra time. I believe there's a mic out there somewhere. So if anyone out there in the crowd wants to ask these two fine gentlemen a question about the deployment, we got one right over here.
Yeah, I have a question about what percentage of your traffic is within the enterprise versus what goes out or in?
So the way Zoom works is all of your traffic goes out to the Zoom data center, right? So you're usually going out through an internet connection. Zoom does offer the ability to directly peer with them and to route all that traffic internally, but in practice, it's not necessary. And especially if you're in a worldwide deployment, as long as you have fast enough internet, and usually Zoom is only one hop away from your, you basically go to your ISP cross connects to Zoom in your telco exchange. And they're very similar to other large carriers, like just think like Google or Amazon, where you can hop over to them. And since they are directly peered with these networks, you very rarely see the iTunes slowdown or the Netflix slowdown, because you're using an entirely different pipe, because you're peered before you're hitting constrained links.
Actually, my question was simpler. Your phone calls, what portion of your phone calls are within the enterprise versus inbound and outbound?
Oh, in terms of the
On-net
ratio?
versus off-net, yeah. How many calls are?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have that information in front of me.
So internal calls, I'm looking at my old data, so in my head here. So it's the majority of our calls are VoIP internal calls. In terms of external calls, the majority of our calls, to be honest with you, are spam calls that come into our environments. And currently today, since I haven't cut over to the new AI analytic spam call blocking that I think
Yeah, we all live with this hell.
that you're working on right now, is that we block over 30% of our phone calls right now in our environment, because it's just spam robo-dialers that are calling our environment. So,
Thank you.
Anyone else out there?
I can ask any technical question too if you want. So.
Hello, my name is Jessie, and my question to you guys is, what is something that most surprised you on your journey to Zoom Phone?
Ooh, how attached some people are with their old desk phones. I think we had to, so we decommissioned over 80%. We kept it we replaced it with the new generation desk phones for about all the common areas, people with offices, and in the labs. And there was a small percentage of users just refused to give it up. And instead of trying to, lack of a better term, battle them with it, we just said, okay, here, you got to give us your headset, and we'll give you a phone back. And that turned out to be a reasonably okay strategy. We just said, just don't tell anybody we're doing this trade-in, all right? Because we don't want a big line of your peers coming. So that surprised me the most. I just thought that, hey, it's easy. You could make phone calls everywhere. You could, take it with you. But it wasn't the case for some corner cases.
The biggest thing that surprised us with our rollout so far is, again, the physical phones, of course, and probably the biggest thing is how fast Zoom is shipping features. To be honest with you, it is very refreshing to see a vendor take a lot of feedback from the early customers and build it into a product like multi-line appearance, the caller ID or voicemail, the RBAC, or just how users can do their own delegation setup by themselves. You don't have to have an admin do it through some PowerShell command to do some boss admin type scenarios.
Gotcha.
And forwarding for that matter. We're also very surprised about how good the IVR is in doing basic call queues and stuff too. It's been pretty decent.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. See if we have any more out there.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hi there.
I had a question. What was your guys' process for selecting your desk phones that you went with, and which ones did you guys end up picking for making models?
Which desk phones?
So with desk phones themselves, our preferred vendor is Polycom, or Poly.com, to use their parlance today. Right now the current supported phone that we use is VVX, because we had a lot of them from our previous incarnation of our phone system, and it was very easy just to reformat them. That's the joys of VVX telephones, is you can flip them from Skype for Business over to Open SIP mode. And the one thing you have to be aware of when you are using these Open SIP phones is that you're using the phones just for calling. They're not meeting-enabled devices by default, and so meaning that they're only designed to make phone calls. Versus in a Skype for Business scenario where you could do like a better together over Ethernet or have that UC experience. Phones in Zoom right now are just for plain old phone calls. They're not designed as unified communication devices right now. Now in the conference room, that is different. So we use trios in our conference rooms, and that's part of the Zoom Room system where you could just issue a phone number to them. And our users like having that physical, old school phone experience. But it is obviously a Zoom Room system because you can just, they're just, the trio telephone is just a Zoom Room controller that pairs with the Zoom conference room, which is really nice.
Yeah, because we deployed Trio in the past, so it was easy for us to go to Poly.
Thank you.
Now, one thing to note when you're dealing with physical telephones, all you need to do is just set up DHCP options, and you just point that over to Zoom, and they'll take over the provisioning from there. So just be aware that with your firewall, you just got to make sure you tweak some stuff on that as well.
Hi, hello. What would be your recommendation if you're planning to move to Zoom Phone, but a good, let's say, 20% of your organization is not yet covered as the region? Would you suggest to stay away from it, or?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, you muddled at the end there.
Oh yeah, sorry. What would be your recommendation if you're trying to move to phone with Zoom, but a good part of a company, like 20%, is not covered as the region?
So you have two options. One, or the only option you have right now is setting up SIP trunking. So you can put it in a local SBC or a local gateway into that environment. And then you can have those calls route through the local SBC. So basically, for countries like India, for example, right now, but you have to be careful with that because you have to abide by TNAF regulations, and Zoom is not entirely set up for TNAF regulations just yet. So it's a little bit more. You got to put your cowboy hat on that section of the world, but. All you have to do is just set up your E1 or T1 or PRI through like an audio codes or ribbon communications or your SBC, and then you can SIP trunk it over to Zoom right now. And you can set it up, and basically what you do is you assign the user on a per user basis to that outbound dial plan, and they can make the calls through that circuit.
Yep, what he said.
Yeah. And we'd love to sit down and talk to you about that, right? So we have a very aggressive expansion plan, and so whether it's BYOC, we could support that today, or else we're looking at those other countries. Your Zoom team can help you out with that.
Yeah, you got it right. It's India. Yeah. Thank you.
India.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's the same thing with China too as well. So those are the two big ones that they're working on right now.
Yeah.
Hey guys, how are you doing? It's really interesting. I'm based in Ireland and I work in the hospitality sector. And I was just wondering, do you think there's opportunity in the short to medium term to convert an entire hotel to Zoom Phone?
So from a logistical perspective, yes. So you could take your VTech, your VTech phone, if you've deployed SIP in your environments, or if you've deployed your, depending on what you're using for your hotel phones. If you're doing an analog, you'll have to go through an SBC and go that way. But it's all about cost at the end of the day too. You could definitely have your hotel employees on Zoom, and then your users just on your SBC or your other phone system, and you can trunk them over. Like I wouldn't, or you could definitely enable all your endpoints as Zoom Phone, but you're probably looking at either using a custom app on an iPad, or using the Zoom SDK to provide a better experience. Because the basic phone experience in the room is just a line key. You can't have any of those hotel features like shortcuts for for speed dials for your front desk and that sort of thing just yet. So
Yeah, I'd say that's not been one of our primary use cases in verticals today, but it's an area, again, would love to help you help us craft that message of what those needed functionality is, because you see some of these hotels with a lot of line keys and extensions and services built into there, so we'd love to better understand what you need.
Yeah, I mean, there's some challenges around the European market. I mean, you guys over here have E911, isn't that right? It's a digital emergency over VoIP. We don't have that type of technology in the German market, for example, or in the UK market. So, but we've done projects where we've converted hotels onto platforms such as 3CX and technology like that. So it's kind of interesting because this has been the realm of companies like Alcatel and big operators.
I've used Alcatel before.
Yeah, so, but obviously moving the PBXs into the cloud is a lot more efficient, more cost effective, and ultimately the future really for hospitality. But there are challenges around the PMS integration, the emergency numbering, the legislation, regulatory issues, things like that. But yeah, definitely be interested to hear of any success stories, or if anybody's done projects like that, we'd be open to having a chat with that. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely Zoom's not set up for, if you're using Alcatel Lucent PBX today with the hotel module, definitely that's not, you're not going to get that out of Zoom. Zoom is more of an information worker phone system right now, so you have extension. You could provision them kind of on the fly through the API, I guess, but in terms of 911 today, Zoom uses a static registration, very similar to a RingCentral or a Vonage right now. Yes, in 2020, early of 2020, there is the law that Congress passed I think it was a year or so ago, in 2017, that requires E911 location down to, I think, a zone of 5,000 square feet in the United States. And Zoom is definitely working on filling that feature set, and that's going to be based on your access switch, your access points in your environment, and if it's in an undocumented area, as it goes to right now, just with like a Skype for Business deployment or a Cisco deployment today, basically if you're not in a registered address and you don't self-register, you're going to someone like an Untitled for a public safety answering point in the U.S. In Europe, it depends on the country and how 911 works, but they're going to be doing a very similar thing where it's basically locations, and typically you map those to DIDs, and that's something that Zoom is working on improving that, because right now it's just a static registration today.
Yeah, wait another month and we'll have dynamic out.
Yeah.
Well, just as for FYI as well, that Voxbone, for example, they preferred carriers with BYC. Voxbone have emergency number facilities once you minimum spend in the German market, for example. So yeah, there's a few workarounds.
Yeah. So hopefully you just saw our announcement with Voxbone this week. So we're very excited about them and GTT coming in.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you guys.
So we're right up on time. Okay. Guys, I truly appreciate you sharing with everyone. I know we'll be around afterwards if folks have more questions. But let's give it up for Kevin and Henry, please.